All right, we are joined by Ty West. We are talking about two, which is wild to say, two awesome movies from the same year. That's just which we'll get into how and why. We got to see this at Alamo Draft House, and you gave a little kind of Q&A and insight for those who don't know. X, if you've not seen X, we've talked about X in this pod, one of our favorite movies of the year. There's a prequel. You got to film them back to back. Not that the pandemic had any great effects, but you had the ability to shoot two movies, and you now have two awesome movies. And we'll talk about Pearl, set in 1918 during the era of the Spanish flu pandemic and World War I. The film explores the origins of Pearl, the villainous character from X. The events take place prior to that previous film and explore how the cabin where the massacre of X takes place was once used as a boarding house during the war. Out September 16th. If you're listening to this now, it's out already. Yep. We had the pleasure of seeing it early. I'll start it out. A lot of daylight in this. An ode to old Technicolor film. We've hyped up movies like Midsummer and what was done with that in the daylight, and you got to do a really cool contrast. Is that how you describe just this world and this vision with Pearl?
Yeah, I think it was really just an opportunity to do something that felt fresh. And even though it's weird to say that because it's a particularly old-fashioned style movie, but I just felt that the subject matter of the movie is bizarre, set within a very golden age of Hollywood, almost Disney-like aesthetic, and that felt fresh, and that felt new, and that felt like a way to take something particularly retro and kind of make it modern for an audience, and that was exciting to me because I felt like, well, nobody else is doing this, and let's try it out.
One thing that I think you did in this movie that was really brilliant was just adding Germans to the mix. Because Tandy, you're right. I think is how you pronounce your name, Tandy, right? Yes. So Tandy, you're right. That was an accidental pun that I didn't mean to make. But she was terrifying, and there's just something about the German language that is just very scary. It's like there's a guttural feeling of fear in the German language. How did that come to be when you were kind of making the origin for this movie?
It's a bit strange. I mean, well, there's a lot of German immigrants in Texas at that time, and that's essentially where it come from a historical standpoint. And the relation to the war, the World War I that was going on at the time was a conflict that would be something going on in their lives as well, and that felt like an interesting story for the character of what they would be going through. And then Tandy is interesting because Tandy was our intimacy coordinator on X.
Oh, no way.
And so I just spent 6 weeks making X, and Tandy was there just, making sure everything was going well. And she was just a lovely person. And she was also an actor, but at this moment in her life, she was mostly just intimacy coordinating. And I had just spent 6 weeks with her. And so when we were casting Pearl, I kind of was like, hey, Tandy, like, why don't you audition for this? And she was like, oh, no, I could never do that. I was like, well, we're going to make another movie, and it'd be fun for you to be a part of it. And, it's not a porn movie, so we don't need an intimacy coordinator for this. But it'd be great to have you around. So if you audition, worst case scenario, you're not in it. We have an awkward conversation on set and we get back to work and it's all fine. I was like, best case scenario, you're in the movie. And she thought about it and was like, I don't know. And then I just got a tape sent to me, like a link sent to me. And on one of the weekends, Owen Campbell, who plays RJ in X, he filmed it. And Martin Henderson, who plays Wayne, he read opposite of her. And she did this 5-page off-book monologue from the movie, the dinner table scene. And it was amazing. And Tandy is from New Zealand. She's not German. She speaks no German. She knew nothing about the German language. And she did this really amazing audition. And then I was like, yo, Tandy, like, you're in the movie. And then in 3 weeks, she really transformed herself into that person. I mean, she was chopping wood and learning German. And we had a German visual effects supervisor and a German sound mixer. And they were both like, if we didn't know Tandy wasn't German, we would be 100% convinced. So it's a real testament to her. And it was really exciting. One of the many sort of like lore-ish like backstories to this movie is our intimacy coordinator then becomes, the co-lead in the movie.
That's great.
Really cool.
I hope if you're listening to this now and you haven't seen it yet, you come back and listen to that after seeing, because that is mind blowing.
It'll surprise you because like you would assume she's been speaking German her whole life. Yeah. And it's just like, I mean, wow. Something I didn't know until you introduced the movie was that this was all filmed in New Zealand. I had no idea. And I'm usually, not that I take pride in it, but I feel like I can usually tell when something's like, hey, this isn't New York, it's Bulgaria or wherever, Toronto or something like that. You can usually tell, but I could not tell. And I would love to know just how you dressed up the farm to look American, not only just in one era, but in two different eras. Like everything looked very, very American.
Yeah, I think I'm also one of those people who can spot Bulgaria, if you will. And
always Bulgaria.
Filmmaking is on sale in Bulgaria.
Yep.
But so because of that, I think I'm particular about it. With X, there's only one area in New Zealand that looks like Texas. It doesn't look that much like Texas, but there's one area, and there's not, because the rest of New Zealand does not look like that at all. And in this one area, we were able to do it. And Tom Hammock, the production designer, who's terrific, like we spent a lot of time on like very particular details, and a little particular detail goes a long way, because it's not just here's something from the period. It's like here's something you remember experiencing, whether it's a street sign, whether it's a bag of potato chips, whether it's the color of a magazine. There's something that really roots you into like your own nostalgic experience of it rather than a commercial thing. And so, there was certainly some foliage and things like that we had to cover and stuff like that. But generally, it was just about trying to get all these little esoteric details to add up to where you would never think otherwise. And then in Pearl, it was a really heightened aesthetic and a heightened version. And really, no one was really around in 1918, most likely, that's watching this movie. So it's hard to say what they would know. But I mean, just the miracle that we were able to find like right side drive or left side drive Model Ts. Because there should not be left side drive.
No,
let alone 3 of them, one that we would push into a lake. I mean, it was like, and they were there. And so thankful there was some car collectors there.
Yeah, I wish the best, but I also hope there's a 1105-year-old that sends you mail and is like, it wasn't quite like this. Sorry, sir.
Didn't capture it.
I'm sure it's on the message boards.
That was literally going to be my next question: is where you found all the cars and trucks and stuff? Because like the one thing I know, because you guys shot it on the North Island, right? Mm-hmm. Peter Jackson has that big estate where he has an insane collection of way too much World War I style, like memorabilia, tons of cars, trucks, tanks. It's like maybe this all got taken from the Peter Jackson and bunker collection.
The truck at the end was loaned to us from him, and so that we were very
that's awesome.
So that came from that. The cars are just for the most fortunate reason for me, there was just a lot of car collectors in New Zealand, and so sometimes a car like a Model T or something like that you think would be very difficult to find is actually easier because it's such a specific collectible thing. Whereas if you like in X, for instance, that van was a miracle because a left side drive 1970s Dodge van is not something people are going out of their way to import into New Zealand, And so, we found a guy that had one, and it was a shell of a vehicle, and we completely redid the whole interior, painted it, the whole thing. It looked nothing like the van in the movie. But especially during COVID, it was not a situation where we could ship a car down there. So, looking for like a Ford Pinto is more difficult than a Model T in a way.
What would you have done if you couldn't find the bus or the van, I guess? Would you have had to switch it to something else?
I have no idea. I mean, we would have been doomed. It was one of the first things we did, so we got ahead of that really early. Yeah, no, it would have been a real crisis because there's a lot of people in that van. I mean, it would be crowded in a car. So it was. I don't know what we would have done. We would have figured something out. Like maybe a pass van or like a Winnebago. I have no idea. Yeah. But it was. We found one, and then we got the one, and that was it.
We mentioned that these were filmed back to back. You mentioned in a pre kind of table setter during the Pearl screenings at Alamo Drafthouse that you pitched it to A24 and it was greenlit, I think, before you filmed, but you wrote this with Mia Goth, who unbelievable in this movie.
So good.
We haven't even mentioned that yet. You wrote with this on FaceTime back and forth, and you made the comment, I believe you said that, hey, if they don't greenlight it, at least we have this amazing like backstory, like just in case. Is this now, granted, it's not COVID anymore and you don't have to quarantine, but is this maybe like a tactic you'll do with future movies? Like, hey, maybe I'll like write something just in case.
I think the odds of me pulling this off again is this is a very once in a lifetime situation that I'm incredibly grateful for. I think the odds of anytime I would bring this up again, someone's gonna go, no. We know what you did last time. You're not fooling us this time. But I'm just really grateful to A24 because they saw something in it, like ideally what I saw in it, and they just bet on it. And we had never worked together before. So it wasn't like they were betting on a relationship with me. They were just, I don't know. They just, sometimes you make a bet on something, and I was fortunate to be the person they did that.
Has there been anything? So there are definitely, if you've seen X and when you see Pearl, like there's definitely in any horror movie, there's some moments of, or maybe lighter, like a good chuckle, a good laugh or something. But in a test screening, with maybe either of these movies, was there something that maybe popped up? You're like, oh, I did not think they'd react like that. I did not know if that's how they'd view it. And then you maybe have to tweak it around a little bit.
I don't think in Pearl, I'm trying to remember. Pearl actually tested very well, which is usually not the case with horror movies, and certainly not the case with like independent horror movies, because it's like the people you're recruiting, some will like it, but you're also just kind of blindly recruiting, or you're strategically recruiting, but it's people that they may have just come out of the Avengers, and it's a bold difference, to jump into some things like, in the sort of A24 world or whatnot. A24 is also great about they use it for marketing or for any, good ideas that come out of it, but it's not as if, how a movie tests, they are going to say, we need to change something. And so they're really respectful to filmmakers in that way. I want to say that in X, there was something that people there was one line in X that was a kind of a throwaway line. And for whatever reason, like people really attached to it, like it meant something really big. And then I just changed it, because that was the one thing I got out of there. I was like, it never occurred to me that people would think like that meant something deep. And it was like, but it was and I was like, you could only learn that by putting it in front of 300 people and having them be like, when she said this, I thought we were gonna, and I was just like, really? Like that was a nothing line. And so I changed the line, and that's about it. But for the most part, the movie stayed more or less the same.
Speaking of X, if we go and rewatch X, are we going to now notice sort of like any Easter eggs? Because obviously you're doing both these things at the same time. Are we going to notice?
You got one behind you right now, I feel like, right?
Yeah, good eye.
I was like, wait a second. Wow.
Yeah, wait, hold on.
Palace Follies,
There's
right?
two.
Is it? Oh,
that's the camera from X.
Shit, that's so cool.
Yeah.
Easter egg interview. Wow, I never had that. Yeah.
Yeah, we're just getting real meta with it. Yes, there's plenty of things. And so, because we did know we were making it prior to it. So
a couple I picked up on, but like there's some really hidden ones too.
Yeah, it can get pretty deep cuts in there. But yeah, because to do them really obvious is a little cringy.
Mm-hmm.
And it kind of devalues the movies in a way, because it was important to me that both movies stand alone by themselves. And so the connective tissue between them and seeing all the little fun things, if are there. But for the most part, I tried to keep them like organic to the movies and not just be so in your face.
It'd be funny if it was like, what was it? Rise of Skywalker or whatever. It's just like, here comes flying in. Goth as the original, or something
like on the theaters. It's like now playing next week Kid Cudi live performance.
Yeah.
A little on the nose. So side note again, we saw this at an Alamo Draft House. I got to get your thought. Love Alamo Draft House. I'm from Austin, Texas, so it's like in my movie going blood. But are you a traditional theater guy? Or are you a dine-in theater guy?
I like both. I think that the only dine-in theaters I really like are Alamo Draft House. And particularly having gone to them in Austin back in like the early 2000s is when I was first introduced to them with my first movie, really. Especially in Austin, the like brand of Alamo Draft House and the audiences that love Alamo Draft House, like they get it. And so for all of the distractions that come with a dine-in theater thing, for the most part, everyone's like, we understand how to do this, and we understand, let's not make a whole thing out of it so we can still watch the movie. Other dine-in theaters to me is just like, down in front, like it's just someone's living room. Whereas I think the Draft House really tries to incorporate as best they can to stop it being distracting. And if you go to see them in Austin, particularly where it's been so baked in to the culture there's a really great deal of respect as far as it's branched out. When it lands in new places, I'm sure they have some bumpy roads in the beginning of people who are just, not quite getting that. Yes, we serve food, but really it's about the movies. So shut up. And I think, and they're really good about being humorously strict about things like phones and talking, and they will throw you out and give you no refund. And it's just to let you know that it's like, yes, order mozzarella sticks, but like, but on the DL, it's like, it's still about the movies. And so I think it's the rare place that you can go to and have a really good experience.
We're like pretty traditional movie theater guys, but we're also not note takers during press screenings and like I think that takes you out of the movie to look down at a piece of paper and start writing stuff. But we are always around just very like feverish note takers.
Furious note takers.
Well, we never been do like a screening at a dine-in. And then it's like it was like a lot of note taking, a lot of like eating,
shoveling.
And we were like, oh my God, this is a chaotic screening tonight. And at A24 was great. They gave us like $50 gift cards, and they were just buying all the food. We're like, we'll have popcorn. Just give us traditional bowl of popcorn.
Yeah.
That was, I think the first time I saw Blade Runner 2049 was in an AMC dine-in. Terrible mistake. Awful mistake. That was a movie that's meant to see in IMAX and not in a dine-in.
Yeah, there's something about the marketing of like, the multiplex dine-in or the big leather chairs, the recliner thing, where you just end up in someone's living room and you're not really in a movie theater, and then the movie becomes an afterthought. And for certainly for a filmmaker or even just an audience who likes to watch a movie, it's just a pain in the ass.
Yeah.
Denis Villeneuve pans over and there's someone in the audience just like cutting a T-bone. It's like, yeah, sure, it'll go over well.
While you were filming X, were you guys like just taking notes, but just generally keeping the prequel in mind? Because I know you're talking about how you and Mia Goth worked a lot together. Were you ever like, you finish the scene and you're like, hey, no, like, remember this? We can do this when we go back and then we do Pearl.
I think I was doing that quite a bit. I don't think Mia was thinking about it. I think she was like full dedication to Maxine and Pearl while we were doing X. But I was certainly, self-aware. I mean, even down to like the opening shot of X and the opening shot of Pearl are referential to one another. And so I was logging things that would make these movies connect, even though they were standalone movies. And there were certain things that, we knew she was going to wear overalls, and we knew there was going to be a spin on that and things like that. So we were getting ahead of it as much as we could. And then I think when we were filming Pearl, there was moments where perhaps in Mia's performance, there was something that reminded the audience and her of older Pearl, or reminded her of Maxine, and there was an interesting parallel and things like that. Like the scarecrow scene, for instance, was in many ways a little bit like Maxine in the barn. So there was like there was moments like that we would go, oh, this would be interesting to lean into that.
Mm-hmm. You kind of mentioned this before. You talked about test screenings and how horror sometimes doesn't always rate well with test screenings. We mentioned this the other day. Who do we talk to? Oh, Justin Long. He's in Barbarian. Mm-hmm. We talked about, I think, the sweet spot, and I'm curious what your perspective is. And I know some people, Rotten Tomatoes and all that don't care, but if I'm looking for a horror movie, I kind of like when the audience score is in like the 60s to 75s, like, because to me, I'm like, all right, I think this may have challenged people out of the box, and they're just like, nah, this is just like I didn't vibe with it. I like, because I don't know, I feel like I kind of get that sense. It's like, it's different, it's out there, it's not just a straight A to Z like slasher. Is that the type of reaction you want? Like a little divisive, like, not that you want people to hate your movie, but I don't know if you share that sentiment.
I think it's certainly anything that I tend to find is good is going to be somewhat polarizing. I mean, it's a weird thing because of something like Rotten Tomatoes or something like test screenings. They're useful, and there is value to the statistics being averaged out and things like that, and you do learn things from it, and you can get a basic idea. But it's like, it's not as if when the audience is watching a movie in a test screening, they're making their decisions and their feedback based on the movie they're watching, or if they're just doing it on the experience they're having, or if they're doing it on what their anticipations of the movie that they've been asked to come see, and everyone is putting on their like, I have an opinion hat that you wouldn't necessarily do in real life. So you're getting a kind of weirdly manufactured environment. And the movies that tend to test the best are the movies that tend to be exactly what they told you it was going to be. Mm-hmm. So like, for instance, like a movie like, say, Toy Story or something like that is like, to not like Toy Story is to just be an asshole. Because it's like, what did you think it was going to be? It is a nice movie for families and children, and we have delivered on that with laughs and whatever, and it's paced and whatever. So it's like, of course that would test well, because it's not like someone went in there going like, well, I was expecting it to be like The Hateful Eight, and I didn't get that. But with a horror movie, you could be expecting a huge range of the spectrum of things, and you never know what people are going to think. And so some people are going to come in and say, well, I was expecting it to be the goriest movie ever, and it wasn't, so therefore I'm rating it poorly. Which is like, well, if you hadn't thought it was that, would you have had a different experience? And by so, it's a flawed thing. I mean, you get a good average idea out of it, but it's never that accurate. So to your point, I think, in that 60s, 70s world, you're in a good place that, like, look, it's more than half. So it's like 51% or more is on the side of the movie, which is a good thing to be. But you're also not something that's just like, this is just a branded product that everyone just approved of.
Yeah. No, that's good insight. Yeah.
It's part of the thing in this movie, specifically, I would say in X2, is just that like horror and horniness are such like a seductive sort of pairing. Is there just some sort of psychology to that like we're just too dumb to really get? Because I feel like everyone has that same sort of visceral reaction to it, but no one can really describe why.
Yeah, I think, they're just subversive ideas, and they're both kind of this controversial, like, these are the outsider elements of movies, these provocative things. And, in X, for me, I was just interested in a story where, generally speaking, a movie like that, the older, more puritanical people are angry that the young people are doing something like wrong. Whereas in X, they're actually just jealous that they can't do it anymore. And that felt like an interesting, more accurate human perspective on it. And sort of, we just kind of elaborated from there. But also horror and porn have always had this sort of symbiotic relationship of being these sort of like outsider genre. Like you could make both those kinds of movies and not be part of Hollywood. You could make them independently. So in X, all those characters are like, we don't need Hollywood. We can make our own movie, and if it's good, we can take it to our theaters that will show it. And VHS is coming, and that'll be great. And this we'll become our own studio. We'll become our own movie stars. And there's something really exciting about that entrepreneurial nature to it. And horror and porn are unique in that way, in that there's a fan base that doesn't have to be part of the overall major system.
I love that.
So for those who don't know, you're a madman, Maxine. We've seen the teaser for now a third movie. When it said coming soon, do we know when we can expect this? Is there anything you can tell us about this? It has like an 80s vibe to it, right? And is it set in Hollywood? What can you say?
I'm going to say very little, and only because we made both these movies back to back, and nobody knew that we did that. And we made it all the way to the South by Southwest premiere of X before we told anyone about Pearl, and that was very satisfying and was kind of part of the fun of the movie. Is that like. There's another movie, and then that gave people debate for a while, and then here we are at Pearl. We made it all the way to the Toronto screening without spoiling the fact that we had the teaser to show. Even down to the moderator of the Q&A didn't even know. You know what I mean? It was like the programmer of Toronto did not know we were going to do that. Like that's how like locked down we had to be.
Did you just like airplay it onto the screen?
It was we had put it on the DCP, but no one. We didn't tell anyone we did it. So it was a and in 2022 that's not easy.
Oh,
so it's like, someone will talk. And so we've been trying to be very careful in what we say. And so with Maxine, yes, it takes place in the 80s. Yes, it takes place in Hollywood. It's a very different kind of movie in the way that Pearl is very different than X. Maxine is very different than the other one, but it is an appropriate companion piece. And it won't be out quite as soon as Pearl was compared to but it won't be too long. But hopefully it'll be just long enough that when you forget, we'll show back up again.
That's beautiful.
A24 put out a casting call for extras on social. I mean, we may have to brush our chops up.
Yeah, I think we can make it good, depending on where it is. I don't know if I could do a good like LA accent or anything, depending on the time period. But like, man, I would have done good.
Did you need bearded white guys? Because I'll tell you what,
we're in short supply.
I'll tell you what,
especially in LA.
Tell you what, people think we're brothers sometimes too, so it could be a stunt double for the other.
Yeah. All right, we want to give you something we call it a 6-pack of questions. So just 6 rapid fire questions. You can answer it, expound on it if you want. You don't have to. The first one is, which horror movies or directors do you think influenced you the most?
I think probably The Shining was the most traumatic movie I saw as a kid, and I think Kubrick was. I'd never seen a movie like that, and all of his movies, they were sort of like, there's nothing else like that. So they were very inspiring to me.
If you had the green light to make any movie you want with an infinite budget, what would you make it about? What would it be?
At the moment, it would be this Maxine movie. So I'll just tell A24 to crank up the crank up the cash. Yeah. We'll start blowing shit up in every scene.
Exactly. We're gonna have this. It's all shot on green screen in what do you call it, studio. What do you think is the best fast food restaurant? It's a very intense question.
Yeah, I would say it's probably In-N-Out, and that's because I've lived in California. Although I like a good chicken McNugget every once in a while on a road trip. Yeah. It's pretty good. Yeah.
I came across an Instagram and TikTok account of a guy in Illinois. He does like first person of him. He owns the McDonald's, like working behind the line. Fascinating. Like just him making McDonald's is it's mesmerizing. I can't get enough of it.
It's like watching the Uruk-hai scene in Lord of the Rings where they're making all the armor. He's just pumping out McNuggets. If you had to sort of like in no particular order, just say 3 of the top horror directors in the world right now, who would you say?
Today, who's doing the best stuff? I will butcher her last name, but Julia, it's a French last name. I don't want to say it wrong. Who did Raw and did Titan? She's really exciting.
That's really good.
Titan, wild movie.
Yeah. I think, Ari Aster is doing really interesting stuff. And who else is out there at the moment? Jordan Peele is certainly doing really interesting stuff, and he's in many ways mastered this sort of like excitement for the next movie kind of thing. Crazy, and that's really fun. There's very few people that can drum up that sort of excitement. So that's cool.
Is there a horror franchise out there that you think should end? Let's say, because every horror franchise, especially the OG, is like going back to Friday 13th, Halloween. There's a trillion of them, and they never stop making them. Is there one that you think could use a nice swan song?
Most of them have outstayed their welcome.
That's the fair answer.
Yeah, I mean, it's not, sometimes the later ones are better, but very rarely. I mean, usually the deeper you get into it, at best you're going to get a good scene out of it. Like Jason Takes Manhattan, for instance. Not a great movie. 2 really great scenes in it, though. Uppercutting a head off in New York is pretty inspired, but yeah, you certainly the wheels come off after a while. So I mean, I'm only going to make 3 of these because beyond 3, I mean, is just you're doomed.
What was the one we watched with somebody? We watched, I think it was Jason X.
Yeah,
they're in space. And freezes the guy. He freezes the guy's head in nitroglycerin and then smashes it. It's like, yeah, there's the scene. There's the one that makes it worth it. Is there? And that's the last one. Who's an actor that you're dying to work with? Like, there's one out there that you're just like, I would love to make a movie with this person.
I would love to make a movie with Tom Cruise. I can't imagine it. I don't see it necessarily happening for sure, but I'm not going to say never. But my feeling about I love Tom Cruise, and I think he's the most movie star. But I also think that Tom Cruise, I want to know if I can keep up.
Like that's a great reason.
So hard, and I want to know. Like I made 2 movies at the same time. I think I got a good output going, but I want to see if I can keep up with. I mean, he's flying the plane with the camera in the plane, bailing out of the plane, all in the same shot, and you're just like, all right, fair enough.
Can you make a promise to us and just say that if you do get to do a movie with him, that you'll make him play a villain, because he is so good at villains and he just doesn't do them anymore? Like you see him in Collateral and even like Interview with a Vampire, he is so good at it, he just doesn't do it anymore.
That would be great. I mean, he's great at villains. He's great at running. He's great at everything. I mean, he's however old he is, he's hanging off a plane. Like they were like, Tom, and he's like, no, I'm going to have to hang off the plane when you take off. And everyone went, all right. And it's like, he just did that. It's amazing.
Yeah.
All right. Last thing, because we got to wrap here in a second. And you can say no to this. If we mark this spoiler, can we ask you one spoiler-ish question?
Potentially.
Okay. All right. So if you're listening now, turn it off. It's kind of spoiler-ish. How many takes for the big moment?
The long take.
The long take. I'll say. I'll keep it vague like that. How many takes was that?
I think we did 7 of them, and I think the 4th one is in there.
Was it
7?
Was that like a fist pump when the first time it was done? You're like, oh fuck, because that's what we were like. Holy,
we were like, oh my god, this is still going. This is crazy.
It was stressful because it was like doing a stunt. And it was the kind of thing is that I knew it was going to be about 6 minutes with no cutting, and it was going to just be like completely a very challenging thing for one person to do. And it was very important that everybody else, the other 45 people around, just got out of the way. Like if your phone went off during that, or if you coughed or you sneezed or a boom went in the shot, it was like the ramifications of what you were messing up was so huge because it wasn't, we weren't sure how it was going to go. And it wasn't obvious we would be able to do it many times, and credit to Mia, we could. But it was definitely one of those things where it was like, please God, nobody get in the way of this, because it was like if you were doing a car crash, it was like everybody needs to be where they're supposed to be because we get one shot at this. And we actually probably got 6 or 7 at it. But it's, if one thing went wrong, it killed the whole thing. And so that was, it was stressful.
What a great crier too, because she got the tears out and like all those, so good.
That was when we walked.
Like 3 different moments where she goes through that. I mean, it's really, and you're just like, wow, this is the same shot, and they've come and gone. It's pretty impressive.
When we walked out of theaters, the first thing we said, like immediately, we were like, holy shit, that moment. Check out Pearl. If you've not seen X, which at this point, you said you don't have to see X first, but either or, make sure you see X and Pearl in theaters. Awesome experience. This is a great time. Hope we get to talk to you again.
Yeah, thanks so much. I'm glad you got to see it. Thanks for taking the time.
Thanks so much.